So just really owning your awesomeness, to acknowledge yourself, that you're working hard, that even if you haven't reached that goal, you've done something. Like, instead of being like, oh, my to-do list there's 10 items on it and I only did 2 today, I'm a failure. Be like, I did 2 things! I'm awesome!
Namaste. You're listening to the Savannah Podcast. Join us on an exploration of Eastern spirituality, yoga philosophy, and conscious living for the new age. This podcast is a production of SavannahSpirit.com, where you can find a large selection of Om and yoga clothing, spiritual jewelry, and unique fair trade gifts from the Far East. Now here's your host, Ashton Subbo.
Welcome everyone to the Savannah Podcast. This is Ashton Subbo, your host. Today's show is all about owning your awesome. And I'm here with my friend and our guest for today, joyologist Tricia Huffman. Tricia, great to have you on the show. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for being on the show. Pretty excited to talk all about being awesome. So you're a joyologist. What the heck is a joyologist exactly?
Yeah, I get that question all the time. And it's really, we all make meanings into any word. But for me, it's why I stuck with that as my name is that I feel it is inspiring others to truly live their life fully and love their life fully. So inspiring joy in others, for them to be able to find it within themselves, though.
I love it. So you, if I'm correct, you were actually working in the music industry when you decided to sort of take on this new position, role, idea of joyology. How did the idea come about? How were you inspired to become a joyologist? What are the credentials or training for joyology?
Yeah, it was something that, I just sort of ended up creating on my own because one thing that had happened that moved me towards it was that my father passed away suddenly, which is when we met, when I escaped to Thailand, and I met you there. And at that time, I had been a sound engineer, and that was a huge dream that I pursued, and it's a man's world, 100%. So I faced a lot of discrimination, actually, a lot of things in becoming a sound engineer, and that gave me a ton of tools to truly believe in myself and love myself. But before that, even when I was growing up, I had a lot of pain, and I eventually got diagnosed with fibromyalgia when I was 18. But through high school, through junior high, dealing with physical pain and people not really understanding because it wasn't diagnosed. So that being a bit like, am I crazy? What is this? My family like wanting to support me, but also like not knowing what to do with me either. So back when I was even in high school, I honestly was going to end my life. And I decided like, well, okay, if I'm going to end my life, then I might as well give life another try where I'm just living life for myself and that I'm going to choose to love myself and move forward. So starting at 15, I chose to love myself and to believe in myself, even when most people were like, what is she doing? That's crazy. When my parents didn't feel like believing in me, with a lot of high school drama, all of that. So really starting at 15, then I started to look for ways to love myself, to learn to live healthfully in body and mind, because I had this pain. And then I had a lot of the rest of the world just being like, I don't know what's going on with Tricia, So that was the underlying thing. And so then when I was in the touring world, when I became a sound engineer and was living it, that I was taking very good care of myself. I was doing yoga on the road. I was eating very healthfully. And these are things that were not necessarily easy to do, but they were necessary for me to be happy and healthy in body and mind.
Were you kind of an outcast being on the road and like doing yoga and like trying to eat healthy, which is definitely a hard thing to do on the road? Like were people looking at you again strange? Like what the heck is Tricia doing over there? Or were people?
Well, totally. I was an outcast anyway because I was a female sound engineer and with a bunch of like, older, dirty, mostly men. And yeah, I would roll off the bus, be doing yoga, be like carrying around, green powders to put in my water bottle and like eating special things. But everyone like loved and accepted me. But it was definitely like, yeah, like I would hang out. And there was also like, I don't think they judged me for it. Of course, they made fun of it. And then also, though, I would be with, all these people that were drinking beer and eating fast food and whatever, and that I didn't have judgment for them either. So I think if I was judgmental towards them, then I would have been an outcast. But I was just sort of like, yep, I'm doing me, ha. And people were more just like, why is she so happy? That was more, so I ended up converting people more to like trying yoga and doing healthy things because I was just doing it and not enforcing on them. And they'd just be like, why does she always have energy? And we're drinking coffee all day long and she's drinking that green powder and like things like that.
Was yoga a big part of the sort of tool set that you created for what then you later created with Joyology and everything else, or where did you start to get the tools? I mean, did you start to create things on your own, or did you borrow from other places? Like, how did it grow into this sort of formulated idea of Joyology?
Yeah, so basically this is what I was saying, that how it ended up happening. My father passing away was the trigger for me creating something, but all of these things that I'd been doing for years to take care of myself, reading different books, taking programs to find joy within myself, and then also taking care of myself by eating well and doing yoga. So I had been collecting all of these tools for years, and then when my father passed away suddenly, it was just this wake-up call, like, people aren't living their lives. Like, we don't know what's going to happen. And people are walking around like zombies and they hate their lives and they hate themselves. And that's horrible. Like, I need to do something about it. And so that was my trigger. But I only knew the touring world because I had been in that world for like 10 years, concert world. So I didn't really know what to do with myself outside of, I will take this to the road. And so that's what happened. So I created a position for myself on the road and I integrated, I'm going to make the artist and whoever else on the tour these healthy foods that will make them feel amazing. I'm going to lead them through yoga. I'm going to put an affirmation up in their dressing room and on stage and a positive quote. And I'm going to be the person that grounds them and lifts them up, because I also got to see firsthand, living in this world, that these people that were absolutely amazing, that were living their biggest dreams, playing for thousands and thousands of people around the world, that they, could buy anything they wanted, that they had amazing families, amazing loved ones, like not even, drama, but that didn't mean that they were stoked on life every day, that they weren't always excited to go on stage every night, that everybody, no matter how much money you have, no matter what your situation is, needs to create their own inspiration. That it's not just like, oh, well, once I do this, oh, I'm living my dreams, so now everything's going to be perfect. So that was, again, with my father leaving. So that's why I was like, okay, I took it to the world I knew, which was these touring musicians, and started with them. But because, they have, people look up to them, they have money, they have fame, then people are afraid to be honest with them. So they're walking around in this bubble and they could be upset and nobody even asks them, like, what's wrong? Like, it actually was a great place to start, because it's like people think that they must have it a lot easier than us. But I feel like a lot of times they have more challenges than us. They work really hard. They're putting themselves out there through their artistry. And then no one's really being honest with them because they're afraid that they will be kicked out of their life or not liked or something, So I, along with the food and the yoga and putting up inspiration on the walls, was real to them and created a space of listening to lift them up when they were down, and also to be like, maybe you need to calm down and be like, this is what's going on right now. Like, this is how you are acting right now.
And so I know you don't really work as much one-on-one, and you don't work on tour anymore as well. But when you are working with people, or you were working with people, what sorts of tools did you give people, or what sorts of ways did you work with them to help them sort of overcome this feeling that, like, well, hey, I got it all, or maybe I don't, but I'm still not getting joy out of life, or I'm not really feeling awesome. Like, if you don't feel awesome, you can't own it because you don't feel it. Like, what are some of the things that you do to work with people that really helps them embody their awesome more and get more joy out of life?
So honestly, one of the biggest things was creating a safe space for them to be fully heard, because most of the times we don't even know ourselves, like, what we're truly thinking or feeling, because we're so worried about what other people are going to think. Whether we are, an actor or an artist and somebody with fame and are afraid if somebody are going to receive our next song right, or if we said the right question in an interview, or just, you and me, that as much as we act like we don't care what other people are thinking, that we're constantly worried about being judged and not being accepted. And so a lot of times what people, like creating that safe space for people, then they were able to fully open up, and that they didn't even realize things that were living within them, right? Like so many fears and worries and doubts and so much stress that we all live with all the time, but we're not aware of it. It's just like all of these crazy thoughts ping-ponging around in our minds. So creating a space for them to open up, and then for them to be able to recognize their own thoughts.
Does someone need a joyologist to start to recognize these things, or is it something like that they can sit down on their own and kind of create this a system of recognizing their stuff more? I mean, that would be like a realm for meditation, and come up and witness the stuff that's coming up and the fears and judgments. What does that kind of look like in your world? Like, how are you actually helping getting your clients to those places where they can start to be more aware of the constant self-judgment or judgment of others, and how that's all going on in their heads all the time?
Yeah, so I didn't teach meditation. Like I said, on tour, I did lead yoga, and I, of course, recommend yoga and meditation for people, but I also tell them that they don't necessarily need that to get that. And so what I ended up creating is that, yes, I had all these tools to be able to tell people and teach people to basically be able to be mindful of to what's going on in their mind. And that's what ended up becoming my Be Your Own Joyologist program, which is a 6-week program that I lead and will continue to lead, or have available to people, is that I am breaking down these tools, and I end up with my own personal stories, just like sharing examples of these things that we all do every day that I feel like is ingrained in our humanity just because of society today. But so much, like I said, fear, stress, worry, doubt, shame, blame happens, and we aren't realizing it. So we're living in these ugly feelings, and we don't even realize, like, wait, what actually happened? Or why am I thinking that? Or even, oh, I'm stressed right now. Like very basic, like one of the things is like they don't stress you out, or the situation doesn't stress you out, is you stress you out. Because it is like, I'm allowing myself to be stressed out right now. It's not like this one person stresses me out. It's that I allow them to stress me out. So how can I not? By being like, wait, they're stressing me out right now. Like, okay, just being able to catch these things as they're happening.
And how does someone move from becoming more aware of these things and then translating that into either not having those thoughts more, or like where do they go after that in terms of creating this space of like, okay, now I'm aware of the fact that I'm judging everybody and I'm worried everybody, I see it coming in, I still don't feel awesome. Like where do we go next? Like, how does that progress from feeling or recognizing all of those things going on, and then moving to that next step to move towards more joy in life and really feeling and owning our awesome?
Yeah, so it actually ends up naturally happening. The more you're able to recognize that you're in a feeling, then you can get your mind around it quicker. And sometimes you definitely need to get your body around it too, whether it's like just going for a walk or doing yoga or like getting the physical process out. Because some things, obviously, we can be pissed off, have more anger, have more sadness over some situation, and not that your emotions aren't valid, but being able to be like, okay, this is what's happening right now. And then, like, let me feel through this and work through it. But it happens. So with these tools that I'm teaching and different things, you just get quicker and quicker at, and meaning me, because like I still have these things. Like, yeah, I still get stressed out. I still get pissed off.
You're not perfect. You don't have all of life figured out yet. Oh my god!
I'm not a joyologist. I'm perfect. That like we're always still like, and that's also in the teaching, that I think that people are always working to improve themselves, but thinking that they are going to get to some place where they're never going to like have these problems again. And it's like, no, this is life. Life is going to always come at you. Like I said, no matter how much money you have or where you live or your success or anything like that, you're still going to get annoyed. You're still going to get stressed off. You're still going to get pissed off. Like, you're still going to like end up judging someone, even though you don't want to be judgmental. But being able to, you just learn to catch yourself doing it quicker and quicker. And so then you can shift it and find the joy in that moment, love yourself in that moment, and love your life in that moment, even if something really terrible just happened.
And what would you say to someone that is sort of coming from that place where perhaps something terrible just happened, or they don't feel awesome? What is your advice to them of like, what are those steps of, okay, become more aware. Like, it's kind of like, I mean, one of the things that I'm hearing of like, okay, well, we need to be more aware of this stuff. And I sometimes think of like going to someone's like, well, you don't need to be sad. It's like, okay, well, screw you. Like, I'm still sad. Like, okay, I'm aware of
Yeah.
it. Yes, I know I'm sad. So what? Like, what advice do you give to people to like create some steps towards moving closer to awesome? I mean, I know you teach this stuff as part of your courses, and you have an in-depth, I'm sure, plan, but very roughly speaking, like someone's in an elevator with you and they're just feeling like, I feel like crap. What are some things that you can help them do so that they can be on that road and that path towards really feeling awesome and enjoying their life to the fullest?
Yeah, well, obviously, and there's a lot of varieties, and like I, said, something awful might have just happened, so that usually means something serious that you couldn't change. But as also meaning pissed off. But so let's say, as you said, I'm in an elevator and somebody just feels awful, something terrible happened. For that, it ends up turning, that quickest one. And I am not about like, don't feel sad, like feel your emotions, but also having the more awareness. And for that situation, it could be just like, look, I know you're in a really hard place right now, in a really low place, but I want you to think of, finding gratitude, or like, think of 3 things that are good in your life right now. That basically, that no matter how rough you're having it right now, that I know that you can find good, or that you can find things to be grateful for. Or if they're feeling low on themselves, like, what can you acknowledge for yourself in this moment? Because we're so hard on ourselves. Like, somebody could be feeling horrible because I can't believe I said that. I can't believe I texted someone that, right? Like, we can go into black holes because we sent an email and then afterwards, like, feel bad about it or whatever. So also just reminding people to acknowledge themselves and seeing the good, finding the good in life. And that's not, if something really awful did happen and they're sad, it's not just like, oh, life is cured. I was found 3 things I'm grateful for. But it's just remembering to like see out of this very dark place that you're in, that like, hey, right now I'm feeling this darkness and that's okay. But remembering the good to be able to get out of the sadness, the lowness quicker.
And now you've mentioned that you've dealt with a lot of chronic pain in your life too. I'm curious, if we can use an example like with your father, where let's say if someone had passed away, there's the natural human experience of emotion and moving through that process. But with something like chronic pain, it could be there continuously throughout your life. So it's not something that's ever really going to shift. And you can't change necessarily either situation. But I think that the chronic pain might be something that could be much more lingering and ever present. Like, what would you say, or what tools have you used yourself to help combat that pain? Is it something that you're just dealing with physically, or do you have mental tools that you use to help with that? Like, what sorts of things do you do for that?
Right. So really, my physical pain is what helped me get more mindful of my mind, because I like to say that I was in so much physical pain that I couldn't handle mental pain. And at that age of being 15, back when I like really was like, okay, I need to get through this, I want to get through this, was just that, is that realizing how much stress we put on ourselves all the time. And that I was like, I already have this physical pain. I can't deal with this. So like that I needed to be honest with people, that I needed to be honest with myself, and that, okay, if, everybody was doing this, but I wanted to do that, that was okay. Or just like that really, for me, the physical pain made me be truer to myself, because I couldn't handle any more pain. And that really, and that's still in my life. Like, I can figure out like, oh, I'm feeling more pain. That sometimes it is just a flare up of something and it's just physical pain. But a lot of times it's too like, okay, is it because of stress, or because I'm worried about something, or because like, it's just like, okay, a lot of times it's because I'm not being honest with someone or myself, because I'm afraid of being judged, or I'm afraid that they won't accept me. Whatever it is, that a lot of times you can feel more tightness. I can feel more tightness in my body that creates more pain, because I'm not being true to myself, which is usually a fear.
So do you teach people to work through the mental process to help deal with the physical process in terms of what they're feeling pain-wise?
Yeah, because, and, not saying that once you clear out your mind, you're not going to feel physical pain, but for me, it's also what made me pursue things that actually made me happy. that just like, okay, I'm in pain. Like, what can make me happy? Like, what do I enjoy doing? And not like, what am I doing just because somebody said I should, or because so-and-so likes it, or this, that. Just like I said, it more made me, and if, telling someone else to do this as well, it's not that all their pain is going to disappear, but realizing that by infusing more joy in their life, then they are going to be getting rid of some pain, and that they probably aren't living like their truest selves, because that's not because of something that's wrong with them, just because that's how as society is, that we follow other people's leads because they're like, oh, okay, people love spin class, so I need to go to spin class, or like people love this type of yoga, so that's the type of yoga I need to do. And that it's just natural, like, oh, so-and-so loves it, so-and-so loves this restaurant, so I should love it. And that we don't even most of the time ask ourselves, like, what do I like? What do I want? Because we're just influenced by other people, and it's not always bad. You could find your favorite thing because someone else suggested it, but a lot of times nobody is even thinking for themselves or allowing themselves to say, oh, I don't like that. And that's okay. Like, that's awesome that you like that, but that's not for me.
What do you think for people is the biggest barrier in stepping into that place to owning their own awesome, or to experience more joy in life? Like, what's the thing that you come across the most with people to actually taking in that step of really bringing in more joy, or getting to know their true self, as you're saying?
So I feel like it's mostly around the fear of being judged. And that I, have realized that I think that the thing we're most afraid of in life is of being judged. Because if you think about it, like, otherwise a big fear for most people would be like the fear of failing, right? If you're thinking, what are most people afraid of? You would probably think the fear of failing. Like, why don't you do something? Why don't you move somewhere? Why don't you, start this business? It's usually the fear of failing. Well, really, if you look at the fear of failing, if you weren't afraid of what people thought of you for failing, it wouldn't matter, right? Mm-hmm. So really, the biggest fear that probably stops us from doing anything in life is, what will other people think of us? So that is what stops us from owning our awesome, because we're all constantly worried about being judged, so we're not being our true self. And even we're afraid to be happy because people might judge us for that. Right? We're afraid to like brag about something that we did that's amazing because we don't want people to think that we're self-centered. We're really limiting ourselves so much because we're afraid of not being accepted by others. And so when you start to realize that, and to be okay with the fact that, that you're allowed to do this, you're allowed to do what you want, and that you're allowed to have, like I said even before, it's that sometimes people are afraid to, like, well, maybe even like, well, so-and-so loves Ashton's yoga class, but it actually wasn't for me. But they force themselves to go, and like, maybe like, it's okay if they don't like your yoga class, right?
There's plenty of people that don't. I'm okay
right?
with that. Yeah.
But just whatever it is. But can you see that like so many people probably would just like end up they just do things because they're afraid other people will like be like, well, what's wrong with you? Why don't you like that? Or that's a very like small thing in life, but small things can affect us greatly like that. So just being able to be honest with yourself and to be like, it's okay for me to be different than someone. It's okay for me to have a different opinion from someone else. That leads you more to owning your own awesome.
What do you do in your life to own your own awesome?
That's a big question. I was going to say, the first thing that came to mind is that I'm to be honest with myself about others. And so even that means, to be able to celebrate my successes, to be able to be honest about who I am and what I want. We're so afraid. It's so funny because we want to be happy. We want to be successful. But then there's a line that once you are happy and successful, then we're afraid to share it because maybe not everyone else is happy and successful. And so we don't want to feel like we're rubbing it in their face. To be able to own that, but also with compassion. So not like, look, I did it, haha, everyone, in your face, but just to be content and grounded in it and to be real. So even if that's like, owning my awesome, and sometimes that's like owning, I was going to say a failure, but not like a failure, but being like, basically just owning everything that I do. And like sometimes it's like, oh, that didn't work out how I wanted it to, but okay. Or just not being afraid to be happy. Do you want to know where own your awesome the phrase came from?
Yeah, sure.
So it was years ago when I was living in New York, and I was after, I just created the Joyologist website and was like starting to do one-on-one coaching. And I was just so freaking lit up on life. I was living in New York City, my dream. I remember just like skipping to yoga class, and it was like my favorite yoga studio I'd ever belonged to in my life. I was so high on life. And I got to yoga class, and the person at the desk was like checking me in, and it was a crazy big yoga studio. So it wasn't like, oh, I know this person, he checks me in every time. Just like, okay, hi, you're here for so-and-so's class, whatever. Like, how are you today? And I realized, that the only acceptable response that when somebody asks, how are you, was to say good or okay. And I hated that. Like that I wanted to say, I'm awesome. But I would always stop myself and be like, I'm okay, I'm good. Because it's like, he really doesn't give a crap about how I feel, right? But at that day, I was just like, okay, how are you today? And I was like, I'm awesome. And he was like, oh, wow. Like, I was afraid he would judge me for saying I was awesome. Because he was just kind of like, okay, how are you today? But instead it was like, wow, that's possible? It's possible to feel awesome? And then that's what it was. I ended up going home and writing a blog about owning your awesome. It was just sort of that moment that like I had been afraid that whole time to own that I felt great, that I was happy about life, that I had to like dumb it down for everybody because they might not be feeling awesome. But really, how does that help society? That we all want to be happy, but we're not allowed to be happy in case someone else isn't happy. So just really owning your awesomeness, to acknowledge yourself, that you're working hard, that even if you haven't reached that goal, you've done something. Like instead of being like, oh, my to-do list there's 10 items on it and I only did 2 today, I'm a failure. Be like, I did 2 things. I'm awesome.
So keep focusing on the positive.
Yeah, and just acknowledge ourselves. We're so hard on ourselves. Another favorite thing to say is just like, would you ever talk to your best friend the way that you talk to yourself? That, like really just think of like, oh, what did I, we're so like, oh crap, like I didn't do the dishes or I didn't get anything done today. I'm so lazy and terrible. It's like, would you say that to your best friend? You're so lazy and terrible. Like, what did you even do today? You would not like talk, or like your daughter or your like, like the person you most love in your life, you would never talk to them the way that you talk to yourself. And so that's really like tying in the owning your awesomeness. Like, yeah, maybe you weren't a superhero today, but you're still amazing. And there are still plenty of things for you to acknowledge yourself for.
Awesome. I love it. I'm owning my awesome. I'm not afraid to share it and share my awesomeness. I'm glad you're sharing your awesome as well. You've got some other stuff that you work on too. So you've got your website that you contribute to regularly. You've got your course that's coming up. I know you have some products as well. Where do we find out more about you and owning your awesome and finding more joy in our lives?
Yeah, so my website is yourjoyologist.com. And that is where you can get access to the 6-week program, the Be Your Own Joyologist. My shop link is there, where that's the first product I created was the Own Your Awesome affirmation deck. And then I have different products, from tote bags to journals to engraved wine glasses, that say different inspiring sayings that have all come from my work over the years and that are part of the program, are things that I use with people to get them out of their head. I like to say, I think it's like to get out of your head and into your heart. A slightly sassy product line. To get out of your head and into your heart. I'm on Instagram and Twitter as Being Tricia, and then I also have Your Joyologist.
Great. We'll put all of that in the show links too, so people can get the different ones if they're not able to write it down right now.
But I'm all over the place.
Awesome. Well, and you're kind of back in the world again, right? Because you, congratulations, you're a recent mother. If I'm now got time to share your awesome with your child and share the awesomeness of the child. So that's super exciting.
Yeah, it really is. And as with anything, it's been like with the child, it's me relearning my own tools. I remember when I was first in getting into my relationship with my significant other, like that was a huge, like, all right. Like, I always am living my tools and practicing what I'm preaching, but that was a big, like, highlighter of like, dun da da da, remember this, because it's that, especially with a loved one, it's like that's when the fears really come up of, will I be accepted? Like, am I allowed? Like, I want to say this, or what if he's not going to love me anymore if I say this? And now with a child, it's just interesting to see how much stress and fear and worry that are real, because you now have a small human in your care, but also, I've been trying to not stress so much about just everything. Like, is she breathing? Like this, that, am I doing this right? Is this? And it's just like, Tricia, remember, you're the one stressing yourself out. And how is this helping the situation? So I've been using my tools.
Keep observing.
I've been using my own tools a lot more on myself to try to get out of the craziness of the mind.
Awesome. Well, as you yourself said, we never get to arrive in the place where that we don't need it anymore. We got to keep doing the work and keep using the tools for sure. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Tricia. Thank you for your advice and for everybody, and hope to have you again sometime, and have an amazing day.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey everyone, if you enjoyed this episode, let us know by writing a review on iTunes. It's the only way that we know if we should keep producing more episodes like these. It also helps us attract new listeners to join us every week and spread the word of yoga, spirituality, and conscious living. Thanks so much for listening. Hope you'll join us again next week.
You've been listening to the Savannah Podcast. To find out more about Savannah, go to savannahspirit.com or follow Savannah on Facebook at facebook.com/Savannah Spirit. For daily inspiration, check out our blog at savannaeast.com. Be sure to join us next week for a new episode, and thank you for listening to the Savannah Podcast.